So I am Nikolai. I am also going by the name Naga, and I am a duelist for Red Esports, and we are competing in EMEA.
But now, the dance of the butterflies from Naga manages to cut Virtus.Pro entirely in half.
Tell us a little bit about your background. We know you're at RAD now with Marvel Rivals, but we also know that you have a past in Overwatch. Tell us about the transition going from Overwatch to Marvel Rivals, transitioning from OD to Contenders to Overwatch League, and now transitioning straight into Ignite with RAD.
Alright, so I actually started playing video games since I was very little, but when I was 16 I started competing in Overwatch, and I immediately went to compete in the Open Division, and this was my first competitive experience, and I actually played on team with Virtus from Virtus.Pro, and I believe we were the only team to go 10-0 in Open Division back then, going straight into Contenders, and then we signed with a Danish organization called Copenhagen Flames back then, and that was my very first contract, I remember, my very first one. So yeah, I played a lot of Contender seasons. I don't even have count at this point, but I played quite a bunch until I made Overwatch League, where I competed for Paris Eternal in, I don't even know what year that is. but yeah, that was the biggest, like, that was my first tier 1, I guess you could say so, right? And now, then I transitioned into Marvel Rivals. I felt that Overwatch had kind of like dried out for me. It was not as exciting anymore, you know, same old same. And then at the very beginning I got introduced to Marvel Rivals, and I was like, why has no one told me about this? This game has been out for like, I think a year at the point I started, if we count like open beta. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm quite behind, but I also didn't immediately have an intention to compete in Marvel Rivals. I just wanted to play it and see how I felt about it. And in the beginning it didn't really stick, but then as I got a little bit better, I was like, why not give it a shot? I actually had people ask me to go on a team before I actually really started playing the game at all. The first scrim I had 20 hours of Marvel Rivals gameplay, and everyone else in the lobby was like hundreds of hours and all top 500. So it was a bit of a rough start, you could say, but it really gave me like a taste for it, you know. I really liked the team aspects of Marvel Rivals. It reminded me of the old Overwatch days, and also having a new spark, you know, with a new game. I haven't had that ever since I started playing Overwatch for the very first time.
Would you say there's like a difference between the tier 1 Overwatch League scene transitioning to Marvel Rivals? You know, when you were in Overwatch League, it was kind of in the middle of not as much new gen, but it was more of, you were coming right in the middle of where Overwatch League wasn't a baby, but it was also developed to a point. How does it feel coming into a new game that is seen as a baby game and it hasn't really transitioned into a full-fledged esports yet?
I mean, it's both really exciting, but also frustrating at times. When I immediately went into the scene, there was not really anything other than MRI and MRC. No one knew anything about what the future held, or at least it was just pure rumors at that point, right? So I definitely feel that it's a new scene, and they're figuring things out as they go. But they seem to have very good intentions, and they want to invest into the esports scene, so those are very healthy signs. And I'm willing and ready to, you know, go along that journey. And now we have Ignite, right? Which was what we all were hoping for, something structured, something major they would introduce, other than this minor in-game tournament and then these MRIs that would just like randomly pop up, right? And be purely invitational as well, so there was no, you know, you kind of had to like find a way to get in each time.
So now we're going to do a little transition into the present day. You know, you've done Overwatch League, you've done Contenders, you've worked through your way up through all the grassroots, and now you're finally established with RAD as a duelist currently in Ignite. How do you feel transitioning into this new team versus other Marvel Rival teams you've been in with the past? Because you were with Luminosity EU, if I remember correctly, transitioning into a new team, a new environment with a new like grassroots organization.
When I initially came into the game, I actually played with a bunch of Overwatch League players like Manatun and Mistakes, Crusade, you know, Sharp, and it was my first experience in Marvels. It didn't actually, after a few weeks, I made it onto the team I'm on right now, but we had minor changes throughout it with coaching and also on the DPS line. So I have not felt too many different environments in Marvel Rivals. It's actually been pretty stable that I've been with this team for a very long time. It was more or less the same roster we had in Luminosity. We feel pretty sure of where we have each other and how our team environment functions, and, you know, we all have aligned goals, what to expect, you know.
So tell us about the group stage. You know, you guys just finished your first group stage with stage 1. You guys came off with the grand finals. You know, we had our battle. We went we did what we did. You know, tell us about the beginning of the group stage for stage 1, like what the thought process going in with the team. What were you excited? Were you nervous? Were you a little, you know, just worried in general about what could come forward? What were those emotions that you were personally feeling and that you could understand with the vibe of the team?
I would say that there was like 2 major things that happened. First thing was we came second in EU in MRC, so we had a pretty good fundamental of knowing where our power rankings were. We knew we were one of the better teams in EU by a margin, because I think especially back then the gap between the top teams and the lower teams was like really significant. So in that aspect of it, I was like pretty confident. But then they also introduced new bans and the game changed. Ultron came out, so the game changes so much with the new bans, and you really have to theorycraft and like think things through. So some days you have a lot of struggle, and other days you feel like you have figured it out and the other team is the one struggling. So at the beginning of group stage 1, I was kind of confident that we would beat pretty much every team besides VP, and VP we even managed to overtake right as well. But I was pretty excited as well. Confident and excited, I think. I was not nervous or worried, so to say.
So you went to the group stage, you guys came out, y'all were undefeated going throughout the group stage, you know, until we get to Grand. But tell us about like what it was going into the first match, getting like seeing what your pool is, seeing the bracket you might be going through, and just going through those feelings, seeing VP in your group, and just seeing like Insomnia and all those other teams that you could be possibly pit against.
We didn't really think too much about our group, to be honest. I think we have very much the mentality that we are playing to beat everyone. And in each group we could pick out a lot of teams that we definitely expect ourselves to beat, if not everyone at that point. So I also think personally I like getting to face the good teams as well, and get to like see what they're doing. You get to experiment against them. You get to see if what you're thinking is working. And a group stage is a pretty like solid place to have these things happening. So, but I don't think we have like the group stage. We knew we would make through as a top team, whether or not we would have VP in our group. Or that being said, there's a lot more competition now. I don't think there's any very weak teams, and yeah, that's with the seeding as well going the side of the bracket, right? Like maybe it's nice we don't have Virtus.Pro and Purple on our side, but it's top 2 that goes through, right? So it's kind of, and every team is good, as I said. We've seen a lot of people, like back in the days, Virtus.Pro would essentially be unbeatable, and they beat us multiple times, and it was not even close. Now you see them like dropping maps or even playing close maps against other teams than us, and so I think the gap has really, really tightened up.
Walk us through the first match going into group stage.
Playing against Al Qadsiya, we knew a few of their team, and they have also been trying some pretty interesting stuff against us at times. And at times in scrims, they have also really like pushed our limits with like how they would approach the ban phase. So they have actually taught us quite a bit, but I still think we were pretty comfortable. We're just better individually and as a team, but it's a pretty good team to start off against. It's not a bad team by any means, you know.
So next up we have the big dog. We had the 2-0 versus VP, beating a team going in was 24-0 in Marvel Rivals. They were undefeated as a total. What was the team's thought process and mindset going into that match? Like, how did you personally feel going into it, during the match, and after realizing, oh, we're gonna beat the team that's undefeated? What was the mindset of the team and the energy?
The energy was intense throughout the match. We all really want to beat them because we have lost so many times against them, and we also feel that we could put up a much better performance than we previously have. So we really were very hungry to prove that, whether or not it would result in a win, right? But ultimately that's what we want to happen. But yeah, we had a pretty good approach. We had good scrim results. We had some things we were quite confident in. I would say on first map against them, we did play our style that we had figured out that worked well for us, but we didn't even play it that well in the match, and we kind of like scrapped ourselves to a first map win. And then on second one, we had them figured all out in the sense that we knew exactly what they would be playing if we were to do certain bans, and what that would lead into, and what matchup we would like to play into this. So we had a pretty good like roadmap for how we would win the second map, and we just first held them, right, and kept relatively fast as well. That's also important for us, not only to win, but also win in a dominant fashion. And we have looked back a lot on the first map because we felt like it was not good enough because it was so tight, and we felt if we can win playing like this, what would have happened if we actually like played remotely close to how we think we should be playing. That's how we were thinking.
So after the VP win, we immediately have a game the next day versus Insomnia. We ended up clean sweeping 2-0. How was the energy going into that match off of the high 2-0 win versus VP? First time beating them in history. And was it a very high energy? Everyone was feeling confident. Like, what were the emotions going in based off of how you could understand?
I think we're almost always quite intense when it comes to matches. We have high expectations for ourselves. My understanding is that everyone was very confident given we had just beat VP, and I think regardless of that we would have been thinking we should win against this team with relative ease, I think. And that kind of like got pushed to our limits on the second map. I think it was like in overtime 5-4, I believe we won. So that was too close for comfort, right? Like this is something that just signals us that we have things to work on, because it should not be that close ever. And no offense to them, they did do good stuff, but we have the expectations that we should be barely losing a fight, you know, against most teams. That's at least the level we are seeking to be at, just like Virtus.Pro were once upon a time.
To end this off, it's been a day since your loss in the grand finals of Group B versus VP. What emotions are y'all currently feeling, and what is the goal moving forward in the playoffs? Personally with yourself, if you have like a personal motivational goal, or just what is the team's goal and going into the future with playoffs coming right up on the rim with scrims coming?
Our goal is to get a pretty specific game plan that we know works, to prove our theories and figure out what the optimal way of playing the game is. And how was the energy, or what was the second part of the question?
Just the emotions that y'all are like currently feeling after like coming off the grand finals.
I think the emotions are that we are still like pushing ourselves a lot, because we know how quickly you can fall behind the other teams, because things are changing quite fast and no team is like necessarily bad. So I think we are quite happy with the first few matches we're gonna face. I don't even know specifically what the first team.
Y'all are playing against All Business. Is y'all's first match.
And then the second one, do you know what that would be? Between Zero Tenacity and Team Peps, right? So like both our All Business and Zero Tenacity and Team Peps are all three like pretty good teams. So we know that this is not gonna be free by any means, right? Like getting top 2 in EU is a challenge that requires our full focus, but it is what we should most definitely achieve and aim for.
Is there anything else you would like to say? Shout out your socials or anything like that?
No, but I mean, everyone is more than welcome to go on my stream and donate a ton of money, even though I never stream. But that would be nice, right? Like, I'll go and buy some nice sushi. Or, I mean, go and follow our entire team on social media. There is sometimes some pretty golden tweets every now and then. Especially Fates make some troll tweets every now and then. Yeah, I think that's about it. You know, follow our socials, donate a ton of money.